In this section here, we're talking not only about education, but specifically about the No Child Left Behind Act, otherwise known as NCLB. And this was in 2001 of President George W. Bush. This was his initiative. And NCLB, that's the reform that we've really been working on in education for the last, 13 years or so. It's primarily geared toward uplifting the nation's neediest and most vulnerable students, making sure that no group of students were left behind. Now, the Act attempts to do this in a number of ways. For one, increased accountability. They wanted to set up challenging state standards in reading and math and then have annual testing for all students in grades 3 to 8. Assessments would then be broken down by poverty, by race, ethnicity, disability, English speaking proficiency, everything you could imagine. Every single tiny group of students that you could imagine would then be evaluated. And if you had 30 or more of those students in any category in any particular year, well, then your school would be evaluated based on every one of those categories. Now, NCLB states that all students in every single category must have 100% passing by the year 2014. Now, think about that. By 2014, every student in every school in every subject has to pass. Otherwise, the school fails. Okay, that's what that basically was saying. And schools that do fail to make adequate yearly progress, otherwise known as AYP, if schools didn't make AYP toward their proficiency goals, they would be subject to corrective action. Okay, so in other words, the state could come in and literally start taking away administrators or, firing people and so on. Now, the second part of NCLB was greater choice for parents and students. And this was the idea that students that were in schools that face corrective action, that those students would be given the opportunity to attend a better public school, including a charter school. The original school district would also have to provide transportation for that student to that new school. And third, a stronger emphasis on reading. NCLB has a goal of every student being able to read by the end of third grade. So, now, if we evaluate those goals, those are great goals. I personally see nothing wrong with those goals. The problem is maybe trying to get there, and maybe even in the negative way that the government approached this. In other words, to be honest, let's be honest, having 100% of students in every single category pass a test, it's just not very realistic. And the fact that if those students don't pass that test, then you're gonna, cut loose on the school. It's difficult. It's a very difficult thing. Now, over the years, NCLB has gotten plenty of negative feedback. In fact, there was a national conference of state legislatures representing all 50 states that came together in 2005. And after a 10-month study, they showed that this law was basically unworkable, and they called for more than 40 changes to try and fix it. The other big deal with this on the state level was that Congress wasn't paying for all these changes that they were requiring. So, it was estimated that this would be an additional, that the things they were requiring would cost each state an additional approximately $10 billion. And the thing is, the federal government was funding less than 8% of that for those programs. So, very difficult time in that regard. The law also created conflicts. between, this law, the No Child Left Behind, and a previous law that had been designed to help students with disabilities. It's called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Now, what's interesting is that No Child Left Behind requires you to test those students with disabilities by grade level. But yet IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, that requires that students be taught according to their ability. So for example, if you had a 9th grade student, but they were only at a 4th grade ability level, the federal law requires you to teach them at the 4th grade ability level. However, No Child Left Behind, at the end of the year, NCLB is going to come along and they're going to test that student with the 9th grade criteria. And if they don't pass that 9th grade criteria, your school gets hit. And very, very problematic here. A lot of the experts also felt that the massive testing that NCLB requires may actually hurt the whole educational performance, because not only does it take days and days away from classroom instruction, but because of the importance of this test, now you have all kinds of schools who are trying anyway, to teach to the test. They don't care if the students know how to learn and create things on their own. The important thing for a lot of schools now is just being able to make sure they can pass that test. And that should not be the major goal of education. That's an issue. So it's gotten a lot of negative feedback over the years saying it's unworkable and unfunded. Let me give you one example. Okay, Brownsburg High School. Just how this AYP is annual yearly progress, remember? So according to AYP, Brownsburg High School, where I teach, in 2009-2010, we had 17 categories of students where we had over 30 students in each category. We made the cut. We basically passed in 15 of those 17 categories. But we fell short in the areas of special ed English and free and reduced students in English. Those are the two areas that we fell short in. Now, a year later, we as a school, our school improved in every single category. We improved in every single category. Plus, because we had an influx of more students, we actually had more categories of students that we had to test that next year. We had 21 categories of students that next year. And we passed, we basically had all the kids, we passed in 20 out of those 21 categories. And we thought that the one category where we fell short in was special ed English, but we had improved our score from the previous year by over 10%. And basically, if you look at the state description in terms of growth, they refer to that as exemplary growth, which defines what the state would call an A school. We would have been an A school. However, because we only made it in 20 out of the 21 categories, on a federal level, according to NCLB, we did not make AYP. And even though we had exemplary results in our testing, because we didn't meet AYP, we were automatically moved into the C range for evaluating schools, and we were marked as an academic progress school. You know, there's something wrong with that. When you can do that well, if you took a student who got 20 out of 21 right on something, and they even made improvement on the one thing they missed, and you looked at them and said, that's not good enough, okay, you're not doing your job, there's something wrong there. But that's No Child Left Behind. Now, final note that we'll look at, and that is that 2014 deadline. What are we doing about that? Because according to NCLB, every school in the country, every single kid in every category has to pass by 2014 or the school fails. Well, obviously, now that push comes to shove and we're getting down to that deadline, this is not going to be as big of an issue, I don't think, because President Obama, about a year ago in September of 2011, he was criticizing Congress for months of inaction in updating the No Child Left Behind law. And so President Obama basically said, hey, if Congress can't do it, I'm going to do it. And so what he did was he basically made it easier for schools to kind of get out of the 2014. He waived parts of the No Child Left Behind. The whole idea, well, his deal was giving states more flexibility to meet those high standards. So he on that program, states that agree to overhaul their low performing schools and to adopt more rigorous teacher evaluation systems, those schools, those states can apply for relief from the 2014 deadline and from some of the other provisions of NCLB, some of the very unpopular ones. And states that qualify for those waivers would then be allowed to design their own school accountability systems. Indiana did receive a waiver. Okay, we've already gotten a waiver on the 2014 deal. But you will probably hear, it's been in the news for the last couple of years, and you will hear more in the future about different ways that schools are now designing teacher evaluation systems, and they're designing ways to kind of overhaul the performance of schools that are not making the cut, basically. And basically the community and the state has a little bit more say in terms of what they're doing rather than the federal government. That's the point where we're at right now.